When I crossed the threshold of my childhood home, my boots still caked with desert dust from the base, I braced for a warm welcome. Embraces, laughter, maybe even tears of joy. Instead, what hit me froze me in my tracks. I let my duffel bag slip to the floor in the entryway and stood there, stunned, as the words sank in like a slow poison. 2 years overseas, 2 grueling years of deployment where every dawn felt like a gamble with fate. And this was my homecoming. My name's Luke, 28, and I'd been counting the days until I could return. I'd imagined my mom throwing her arms around me like in those heartwarming videos online, my dad giving me a hearty pat on the shoulder, my siblings shouting my name in excitement. Instead, I walked in to see my mom clutching my younger brother first, tears streaming down her cheeks, murmuring, "You were the one who stayed when we needed you." My dad barely glanced up from his mug before saying, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, by the way, your room's the baby's nursery now. Hope that's okay?" I didn't respond right away, just forced a tight, hollow smile that didn't reach my eyes. The adrenaline from the long flight home still buzzed in my system, but it was fading fast, replaced by something heavier, colder. I stepped into what used to be the living room. Now it was a chaotic shrine to infancy. Baby toys scattered across the floor, a playpen where my dad's old armchair once stood. My duffel bag sat by the door, a glaring symbol that I'd been gone long enough for them to rewrite my place in this house. My brother, Jake, lounged against the doorway, smirking like he'd won some secret contest I hadn't known we were playing. "Don't act so surprised," he said like he was doing me a favor by explaining. "You were gone for 2 years, we had to adapt. By the way, we set up a spot for you in the garage until you figure out what's next." The garage. What's next? As if I hadn't spent 2 years dodging danger while he played the dutiful son and claimed my space. A spark of anger flared in my chest, but I kept my mouth shut. Truth is, I'd been bracing for this moment since my last call with them 8 months back. Their voices had been distracted, detached, like they'd already moved on. No visits, no care packages, barely a text. The only time they reached out was when Mom asked for money to help with some bills. I sent it, of course, thousands over those 2 years. And now, standing in the home my grandfather built with his own hands, I felt like an intruder. Worse than an intruder, because even guests get a proper welcome. I sat at the kitchen table, letting their words wash over me. Dad rambled about how tough it was when the roof started leaking last winter, how Jake stepped up like a real man to handle it. Mom jumped in, complaining about the cost of childcare and how everyone had to chip in. "We really came together as a family while you were away," she said, shooting me a look that felt like an accusation, as if I'd chosen to abandon them. I wanted to yell. I wanted to tell them about the nights I lay awake in my bunk, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if I'd live to see this house again. I wanted to scream about how I clung to memories of this kitchen, this family, just to survive. But I didn't. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd carried since leaving the base. I didn't open it yet, just placed it on the table with a quiet thud and looked at them. "What's that?" Dad asked, his brow furrowing. "You'll see," I said, keeping my voice steady, almost casual, though my pulse was racing. I wasn't ready to reveal it yet. I wanted them to keep talking, to keep digging themselves deeper, showing me exactly how little they valued me before I turned the tables. And they obliged. Jake chuckled. "What, you think you're gonna demand your room back? We just painted it last month, pastel yellow, real nice. The baby loves it." Mom nodded eagerly. "It's been such a blessing to have that space. You're hardly ever here, Luke. You've got your own life now. We had to think about what was best for the family." That word, family, stung like a slap. As if I wasn't part of it anymore, I leaned back, letting the silence stretch, watching them squirm. I could feel the shift coming, but I wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet. I wanted them to feel like they were still in charge, right up until they weren't. Then Dad spoke, and I nearly laughed out loud. "You should think about settling down here, getting a job nearby. Jake's been helping me manage the property, but it'd be good to have both my boys pitching in for once." I almost grinned. Almost. Because in a moment, they were about to learn just how much I'd been contributing, and how much power that gave me now. I slid the folder closer, resting my hand on it, and waited for Mom to return from soothing the baby upstairs. I wanted everyone present when I dropped the bomb. When she finally sat back down, wiping her hands on her apron, I looked at each of them in turn and said, "You need to read this." I pushed the folder across the table. Their faces drained of color as they saw the first page. But I stayed silent, letting it sink in. Dad was the first to react, his usual laid-back demeanor crumbling into confusion, then shock. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the page like he'd misread something. Mom picked it up next, her hands shaking as she flipped through the documents, legal terms, signatures, dates. Her lips tightened into a thin line. Jake was last, his smirk vanishing when he saw my name in bold under owner of record. "What is this?" Dad demanded, his voice sharp now. "It's the deed," I said simply, leaning back. "The land title and the transfer documents. It's all in my name now." The room went dead silent, the kind of quiet that hums with tension like the air before a storm. Mom started, then stopped, shaking her head. "This is a mistake. Your grandfather left this house to us." I nodded slowly. "He did. But last year when Dad asked for money to fix the roof, I agreed to cover it on one condition: the property gets signed over to me." He agreed. "It's all there notarized." Jake's chair scraped as he shot to his feet. "You're saying you stole this house out from under us without telling anyone?" I shrugged. "I told Dad," he signed. "Guess he didn't think to mention it to you?" Dad's face twisted with anger, but beneath it I saw guilt. He knew he'd signed those papers, knew what he'd agreed to. He just never thought I'd actually follow through, that I'd make it official. "You had no right," Mom snapped, her voice rising. "This is our family home. You think you can just waltz in from the military and take over?" I met her gaze. "I didn't take anything, you gave it up. You asked for my help and I gave it, more than you ever realized. I paid for the roof, the taxes, the overdue loan payments. Without me, this house would have been foreclosed on last year." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom looked like I'd struck her. Dad stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. Jake predictably broke the quiet. "So what, you're gonna evict us? Kick us all out after everything we did while you were gone?" I raised an eyebrow. "Everything you did? You mean turning my room into a nursery without asking, acting like I didn't exist, making decisions like I was already gone for good?" His face reddened, but he didn't respond. "I haven't decided what I'm doing yet," I said, my voice calm. "But things are changing, starting now." Jake scoffed. "You can't just come back and start giving orders like you own the place." I gave him a slow, deliberate smile. "Jake, I do own the place." His jaw clenched. Mom put a hand on his arm like she was scared he'd escalate things. Dad sank back into his chair, rubbing his forehead. The balance of power in the room had shifted, and they all felt it. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted them to sit with this, to feel the weight of it before I made my next move. So I picked up the folder, tucked it under my arm, and grabbed my bag. "Where are you going?" Mom asked, her voice sharp with worry. "Into town," I said over my shoulder. "I'll be back, don't wait up." I left them sitting there, pale and silent, wondering what I'd do next. That was the point, I wanted them to wonder. When I returned that night, the house was still, save for the hum of the fridge and the faint creak of the floorboards under my boots. The kitchen lights were on, but the table was empty. No folder, no family. For a moment I thought they'd left, but then I caught hushed voices from the living room. I paused just out of sight. "This isn't right," Mom whispered, her tone sharp. "He blindsided us with that paperwork. We have to do something." "You think I don't know that?" Dad snapped back. "But it's legal, my signature's on it. I told him we'd sign if he paid for the roof, and he did. I can't just take it back." "So what? We just let him take over." Jake's voice was loud, furious. "He's gonna kick us out, I'm telling you. You saw his face." I nearly stepped in but held back, leaning against the wall to listen. "He won't kick us out," Mom said after a pause. "He's just upset. We need to make him feel bad before he does anything drastic." "Yeah," Jake muttered. "Maybe remind him who was here when Grandpa passed. Who stayed and kept things running. He wasn't here. He doesn't deserve to call the shots." That stung, but I kept my expression neutral as I stepped into the room. Jake flinched like he'd been caught stealing. Mom's face softened instantly, slipping into a forced smile. "Luke," she said carefully, "we were just talking about you." "I heard," I said flatly, dropping my bag onto a chair. "All of it." Silence. Dad cleared his throat, trying to sound calm. "Son, we just need to talk this out, be honest with each other. Nobody's trying to take anything from you." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Nobody's trying to take anything from me? You already did. You took my room, my place in this family, and made it clear I don't belong. Now that the tables have turned, you want to talk." "That's not fair," Mom said quickly. "You don't know what we went through while you were gone." I turned to her. "You're right, I don't know what you went through. But I know what I endured, dodging bullets, wondering if I'd make it home, and still sending money every month to keep this place afloat. And when I finally walk through that door, you hug Jake first and tell me my room's gone, like I'm nothing." Dad stood, looking like he wanted to speak, but I held up a hand. "No, I'm not done." The baby's cries echoed from upstairs, but nobody moved. "What are you going to do?" Mom asked, her voice softer now, almost desperate. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the window and looked out at the land, my grandfather's fields, the woods we played in as kids, all mine now. When I turned back, their eyes were locked on me. I haven't decided, I said evenly. But things change now, Jake snorted. You can't just waltz in and start running the show. I smiled, calm but cold. Jake, I own the show. Mom reached for his arm again, silencing him. Dad sat back down, looking defeated. I didn't wait for more arguments. I headed to the garage, the cold, bare space they'd cleared for me, and closed the door. It was unwelcoming, the concrete floor stark, but I didn't care. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my emails. Mortgage statements, wire transfer receipts, notarized documents. I'd kept everything, and now it was my leverage. Through the door, I heard their muffled voices. Jake angry, Mom trying to calm him, Dad muttering about keeping things civil. I smiled to myself. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The next morning, breakfast was a study in tension. Nobody met my eyes. Nobody said good morning. Mom slid a plate of eggs across the table like I was a stranger. So, I said, breaking the silence, about those financial records. Dad didn't respond. Jake snapped. You want to see everything? Fine, but you'd better be ready to actually do some work because we've been handling it all without you. I ignored him. After lunch, bring whatever you've got. Mom spoke up, her voice cautious. Luke, can we take it slow? You just got home. Maybe we should celebrate, be a family, before diving into all this business. I stared at her. Celebrate how well you all did without me? Her face flushed and she looked away. I'm not here to argue, I said, standing. But I'm not here to be treated like an outsider either. I own this house now, and that means I have a say in how it's run, whether you like it or not. I walked outside, letting the screen door slam. The morning air was sharp, and I breathed it in deeply, feeling alive for the first time since I'd landed. Beyond the barn, the fields stretched out under the rising sun. My grandfather always said land was a man's legacy, not for wealth, but for the future it promised. And now it was mine. Inside, their voices rose again, arguing about me. Good, let them argue, let them stew. That afternoon's meeting was like a scene from a play, thick with tension. Dad had spread out folders, bills, and receipts on the dining table. Mom sat rigidly, arms crossed, like she was there to mediate. Jake leaned against the doorway, practically vibrating with resentment. I sat down, opened my folder, and the room went silent. Let's start with the taxes, I said, my voice steady but firm. Dad pushed a folder toward me. Everything's paid up now, thanks to you. I glanced at the numbers, then slid it back. And the utilities, Mom shifted. We've managed those fine. Except last winter, I cut in, pulling a receipt from my folder. When the electric company sent a shut-off notice and I paid the $1,200 balance, here's the bank statement where you thank me for it. Her face reddened. She didn't argue. Jake, of course, jumped in. So you're just gonna wave your money around and act like you're in charge? It's not about money, I said, meeting his glare. It's about respect. I spent 2 years sending everything I had to keep this place standing, and you welcomed me home by giving my room away and acting like I don't belong. You didn't just take my space, you erased me from this family. Dad looked exhausted, like he'd aged a decade overnight. He rubbed his temples. What do you want, Luke? I'd been waiting for that. First, I said, I'm taking my room back. The nursery can move to the guest room. I'll pay to repaint and set it up for the baby. Second, all major decisions about this property go through me, repairs, sales, upgrades, everything. If my name's on the deed and I'm footing the bills, I get the final say. Third, I looked at Jake, everyone pays rent. Jake's jaw dropped. Rent? Are you kidding me? Dead serious, I said. You think maintaining this place is free? You want to stay here, you contribute. A fair amount not to bleed you dry, but enough to show you're invested. This is ridiculous, he spat. You can't turn this into some kind of dictatorship. Mom, Dad, tell him this is insane. But they didn't speak. I leaned forward. Jake, I'm not asking you to like me. I'm asking you to respect what this house means. If you can't, you're free to leave. You're a grown man, get your own place. But if you stay, you play by the rules. He glared at me, chest heaving, then stormed out, the door slamming so hard a picture frame shook. Mom looked like she might cry, but Dad just nodded slowly. Fair's fair, he said quietly. You've earned that much. The battle didn't end that day. There were more arguments, tears, and tense meals over the next week. But slowly, things began to shift. The nursery was moved to the guest room, as I'd said. I spent a weekend painting it myself, choosing bright colors that made my niece giggle. My room was cleared out and restored, minus a few boxed-up items, but it felt like mine again. Jake grumbled about the rent but eventually paid, maybe because Dad made it clear he had no choice, or maybe because he saw I wasn't bluffing. He even started pitching in more with maintenance once he realized I wasn't just flexing power. Something unexpected happened, too. As I took charge, my parents seemed almost relieved. Dad started asking my opinion on repairs and plans for the land, like he was handing over the reins. Mom softened, no longer treating me like a stranger. One evening, weeks later, we sat on the porch watching the sunset over the fields. Dad cleared his throat. "Your grandfather would have been proud, you know, you did what needed doing." I didn't respond right away, just let the moment settle. "Maybe," I said finally. "But next time, don't make me fight so hard to be part of this family." He nodded. "Fair enough." The house felt different after that, not perfect, but solid. I'd drawn my line and held it, and they saw I wasn't the kid they could push aside anymore. The best part? A month later, Jake approached me on his own, asking if we could plant a new row of trees along the north fence like Grandpa used to. I said yes. We worked together that weekend, not talking much, but the air wasn't hostile anymore. It felt like a beginning. When we finished, I stepped back and looked at the house, the land, everything that had caused so much strife just weeks before. It felt like mine again. And for the first time since stepping off that plane, I truly felt home.